Hey, folks, and welcome to another episode of Plan A Conversations. I hope you really enjoyed last week's conversation with Barbara Chen on reimagining purposeful policing in the United States. She's using her incredible background as a media director formerly with the NYPD to create new levels of resourcing and resources for creating conversation on how we can have more purposeful, intentional conversations with all that's happening in policing with Black and brown bodies in the United States in particular. So I hope you really enjoyed that. As you all know, I've been really excited to have this conversation. I talked to you about it in December of last year. You all wrote to me after I had Karyn Parsons on for the first time with her first book, How High the Moon, for this podcast. When is she coming back? We want to hear more about her. Her writings are so incredible. Sweet Blackberry on Netflix is just insanely brilliant. And here she is back again. And we're going to talk about her new book and a bunch of other really interesting things that she is undergoing right now. Her new book is How Bessie Coleman's Dreams Took Flight, Flying Free. And it's the other Bessie Coleman. And we'll talk about that because I know a lot of people are like, wait a minute, isn't Bessie Coleman a singer? No, the other one. Karyn, welcome back to the show. So good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you.
So one question I'm really curious about just right out the gate, why children's literature? You could be writing about any things like a consortium of other creative interests. Why children's literature?
It's just something I stumbled into, I have to be honest. Writing is something that I've loved doing, but my mother was a librarian, and when I was an adult, she threw out my childhood, so I was in libraries my whole growing up. But then as an adult, she headed the Black Resource Center at her library and would come across stories that she found really interesting about Black people in history. And she would share them with me. And in particular, she told me the story of Henry Box Brown, an enslaved man who literally mailed himself to freedom in a box and survived and then traveled the world because once he was across state lines and they opened the box, he was free. And he spent the rest of his life traveling and telling this story. And I found it so incredible, but also I couldn't believe I hadn't heard it. None of my friends had heard it, that this wasn't something in picture books for kids, because it just sounded like a book for kids, right? This secret and this triumph and all that it can teach us about determination. And so that was the impetus for my organization, Sweet Blackberry, because I wanted to bring stories, little known stories of this kind of triumph and facing tremendous obstacles and using them as and then actually becoming ways of finding greatness, right? Mm-hmm. So that was just tumbled into it. I mean, I wanted to tell his story, and then I started finding more stories I wanted to tell, and somebody had to write the stories, and so I wrote them, even though at the time they were just films; they weren't books yet. Right. I was writing the scripts for them, and eventually that led to me writing these books for them, and even my book, How High the Moon, which is a middle grade book. I think a lot of people had been paying attention to Sweet Blackberry, and they liked the things that I was putting out there for kids. And so it was an automatic, God, we'd love to see a novel if you'd write a novel for kids a little bit older. And I had something in mind that I wanted to share. Another story about somebody, wasn't all about someone from history, but it was about a slice of time. And there was someone that I wanted to bring in from history into that story. So it's just, and I'm not a history buff either. So it's not like I came from a history background. Mm-hmm. These are just, as you learn things and you get excited. In my case, I got excited and wanted to share, particularly with children. I thought, and I still think, that if children are introduced to these stories early in life, that it changes their whole outlook on race and their relationship to the world, their capabilities, their neighbors' capabilities. It just changes how they look at race in general if they recognize all these great accomplishments from people, from people of color, and see, what I'm capable of doing in the face of adversity. And I just think that history has eliminated a lot of these stories, has failed to put them in books intentionally. And it is what it does is it sends a message to children, all children,
Yeah.
about people of color and what we think of them by omission, as
Mm-hmm.
well as what we decide to spotlight and highlight. And if I can help by bringing to light stories that are being forgotten, and that
Mm-hmm.
we all have so much to gain by knowing,
Right.
then I would like to do that. And I think you can tell it just like it's fun, like a fairy tale, because they're incredible stories.
Yeah.
So, share them like a fairy tale. Kids take them in like they're fairy tales, not like this is important history and you have to memorize these dates by Friday.
Yeah.
Instead, it's fun and it's exciting, and I want to meet them where they are too, so they can relate to it. It's not above them and there's reaching for it. Instead, it's coming right to them, and then it goes in and you plant the seeds. You don't tell the whole story to little people, but you give them enough. As they get older, they go, I know who that is. And they find
Yeah.
out more. Or they tell
Mm-hmm.
someone, I heard about this person before. And they start to be receptive to more information or to investigate. So that's really what the Sweet Blackberry stories have been about. And that's how I just got into that on accident.
I love that on accident. And we were just talking offline. My partner is an educator and he works in the district. And as soon as I showed him your book, he was flipping through, and he goes, accessible. He was like creative, like kids are seeing themselves here. And he just was even saying to himself, like, where are more series like this so that Black and brown people, especially Black kids in particular, can be able to see themselves reflected in a much more positive light,
Yes.
throughout history and even present day.
Yeah. And if you see that growing up, if you're just around that all the time,
Right.
it feels like it's all open to you,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm reading about it. I mean, when I was little, it was like snowy day, the little girl in corduroy.
Yeah.
You know,
Shel
there,
Silverstein for me. Like,
yeah, I love Shel Silverstein. I read Shel Silverstein to my kids. I still love Shel Silverstein. But yeah, but this in terms of like recognizing yourself and stuff, there wasn't a lot of it. But I
right.
think if kids see that more regularly, and not just for Black and brown kids, it's for everyone to see Black and
Agreed.
brown people, so that we all see each other. We're
Hmm.
all a part of this together, not like we are the dominant people and every now and then a special Black person comes along. Barack Obama, it's like you
Right.
just get one every.
Hmm.
I think people need to see the true history that we come from. If everyone grows up understanding, knowing it, and owning it, because these are American stories, these are all of ours.
Yeah.
These people we all can learn from. If we have that, it just changes. I think it just changes the whole landscape of race for kids coming up into the world.
Yeah, coming up into the world. I was speaking with my great aunt yesterday. She's 96 years old.
Oh,
And she was just literally telling me about the importance and the magnitude of this moment with the first woman of color, African American, Southeast Asian descent, who's going to be, the vice president. And she
yes.
said, if you would have told me that I would have lived throughout this period of time and saw the first African American, and then she's going on which she used to work in government, so she's going on the different municipalities and places and spaces. She goes, I would not have known that. She goes, but more importantly, what the thing for me that I really hope comes out is there's many of us who are doing really great things because we
Exactly.
have a very rich history. And she
Exactly.
goes, is that history that I know that a lot of people don't know. So this is
Right.
just, it's incredible work.
Yeah, it's great. It's like my mother grew up in South Carolina,
Mhm.
and she grew up, and it was segregated. And I found out at some point later in life that she learned a lot about Black history that I didn't learn about
Mhm.
as a
Mhm.
child. And she assumed I was learning because they were teaching it in her school. Those teachers were making a
Wow.
point of bringing a lot of that to the kids. I was growing up in all mixed schools in Los Angeles, California, and I wasn't learning any of it, you
Wow.
know? And
Yeah.
so it's interesting, like your grandmother probably is so privy to so much information that the textbooks have moved away from having in the
Mhm.
books. that they're not teaching in a lot of the schools. It's very selective. I mean, I'm really happy to say that in my son's school, they teach them to pay attention to who's writing the books.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You read this article. Who wrote the article? Make sure you understand who wrote it, because that affects what you're reading.
Yeah.
What's chosen. And I think that's something that I grew up and we just took it for granted, that like, it's almost like
Same.
the Almighty wrote it, it landed, the book on history just landed.
Right.
You weren't thinking about, well, a person sat down and wrote this and decided what to keep in and what to omit, how to slant it, or what, maybe they didn't even decide. They just wrote it from whatever their perspective was. And anyway, I'm going to go off on a tangent.
No. I mean, it's all indicative and just into this conversation in general. And how high the moon. I cannot tell you, Karyn, how many people emailed and just said, I've never seen or heard of story where there's this character who, again, looks like me, who seems to have a lot of the emotions that I seem to have, and like this level of being able to dream. Before we get into your second book, Flying Free, what was the response like for you personally? And then also with just people that you have been out speaking to?
Oh, it's been really interesting. It's such a journey for me. Having had it, personally, having had a background as an actress for my whole life, it's all I ever wanted to do. It's always all I did. And then to, very carefully and timidly dip my toes into another pool and not tell everybody I was doing it as I made my way down into deeper and deeper water, because I was just afraid. I was afraid people would laugh at me. I was afraid at the reception. I was afraid it would be bad. I had to keep telling myself, well, it's not going to stop you from going forward. You just, because you want to get better. And if people happen to be watching while you work on getting better, then that's just the way it goes. You're not going to stop.
Right.
And you keep telling yourself that, even though you're
Of course.
nervous the whole way. But it was such a good experience. I was so, the book was so well received by audiences, by critics. And what was really something was the authors, illustrators, the kids lit world, particularly the African American authors of children's literature, have been like family. They've been, that's going to cry. They have been amazing with me. They've just arms outstretched where I expected side eye from everybody. Instead, and there probably are some, but I don't see them, because all I seem to see are people saying, good for you. This is exciting. This is great. Keep going, Karyn, just championing me and celebrating every little accomplishment that I make along the way. People have been there to give me advice and just beautiful, like nothing I could ever have expected. And not saying that people were bad in the acting world, because I had people that were great, but not the same. People
How
have been
so?
really supportive. And that was great. And then the book itself, the subject matter and everything of the book, it's incredible when you write something and you touch people that you'll never meet.
Yeah.
And they write you on social media and say, I can't put this down, or this is how this affected me, in these very personal ways. That one I can't get used to, from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I feel tremendously honored to have affected people, growing up watching the show, or even watching it now, and they say, oh, I love it. It means so much to me, or it was such a part of my childhood. That's a big deal. That's, I've spent many years dismissing that and kind of like laughing it off, like, oh, that's cute, that's sweet, that's flattering, and not letting it
Wow.
land.
Really?
I think it's because it's too heavy.
Okay.
And I've allowed it to land, particularly after we had our reunion this past fall. And I've let it land that when you can affect people that way, whether it's through acting or through your writing, it's an honor.
Yeah.
It means so much because I know how people touch me,
Mm-hmm.
and I have TV shows, sitcoms that I grew up with that they may have been silly and fun, but they hold a special place inside of me, and they helped form me. They're a part of me.
Right.
And to think that I am a part of something like that with Fresh Prince, to think that How High the Moon could and Sweet Blackberry touch people on a personal level,
Mm.
it's no small thing. I don't take it that way. I am honored to hold that place.
Yeah. What sort of happened for you? Because you were saying after reunion, you were able to maybe accept it and feel it a little bit differently. What happened for you in that period of space for you to be able to sort of allow the heaviness to land differently or to receive it differently?
For one, I think it was a monumentous occasion. You
Mm-hmm.
know, all of us coming together, acknowledging the 30th anniversary. And I spend time going to Comic Cons. So when there's no
Yeah.
pandemic. And I had entered them very cynically, like, oh God, what's this going to be? I had this whole thing, people all dressed up, and I've come to love them because I get to meet people that are celebrating everything they love, and they're making their costumes, and they're showing up, and they come to you and they pour their hearts out about Fresh Prince or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I love being able to connect directly with people and
Mm-hmm.
talk to them. And in that time, I've really seen how I've heard so many stories, and I've seen people break down. And then when we came together for the show, and all of us together acknowledging the show on the set, because they rebuilt the set, that was crazy. That was weird. And it just, Will was really driving it home to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's been 30 years since we first did this. This is our anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt it from everyone. And then Janet, who played the first Aunt Viv, with that
Karen.
healing happening for all of us, I didn't know how much I needed it until it happened. And when it happened, I was like, oh God, woo, I can breathe. I didn't know that valve wasn't working, It was like,
Did
it was
you all not
tremendous.
know that she was coming at all?
We were told after, gosh, I think it was after we had arrived, we were told that the two of them got together. Before had gathered, I think. We were told that Will and Janet got together, which was huge. And then we were told right before, the day before, we saw her. They told us that she's going to come visit. Now, I've seen Janet in the years.
Okay.
Not a lot, but we
Uh-huh.
did work together on a job, and I bumped into her someplace in New York. Not in a while, but so it wasn't like I haven't seen her in 27 years, but still,
Yeah.
what I see of Janet is usually on the internet, angry, and just not having anything to do with the show,
Right.
and very, very angry about what happened. And to hear so much that I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
was really, I think it was important for everybody. And most important is that she and Will talked one-on-one
Mm-hmm.
with each other, and things came out. And to see what really got me, which I didn't expect and I hadn't even given a lot of thought to, was to see her and Daphne hug.
Yeah. As a viewer, Karen, like my partner was like, "What is happening to you?" I was just on the couch, just sobbing because I mean, like you're saying, we grew up with you all, and that was our Aunt Viv,
Right.
and to see that level of reconciliation for people that I did not even know they never met before,
Yeah, they've never met before.
mind blowing.
Yeah.
And to see that modeled on a global stage like that, friends afterwards were reaching out to different friends and were saying, it's time to now have conversation, because I had no idea if Janet had these experiences we didn't even know about. Imagine about the person who I'm in conflict with.
Exactly. Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
It was really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is something that it's, you can wave it off as like, oh, it's just some sitcom. But the truth is, we're human, right? We're leaning in and watching the show and investing in the stories and the characters for that little 22 minutes of time. And and you live with them, and then you turn it back on, and you know who they are, and you know what they're going to do, and you know what's going to probably happen here. And you're invested,
Mm-hmm.
so you invest in these lives and these relationships for that time that you kind of check out into that world. It's no small thing. So
No.
when you see this kind of that healing, it makes sense that it hits everybody, that everybody goes, oh, I felt that. It's like when Uncle Phil, when James Avery passed away, I couldn't believe the outpouring of love. I just thought, I had no idea so many people were like, he was my dad. He was
That's
my,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
and of course he was.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I heard all that I thought, oh my goodness, of course he affected people like that. He affected me every day. But people tuned in and felt
Mm-hmm.
his incredible big warm presence,
Mm-hmm.
and it held a part in them, you know.
Right.
I love that about people, about humans, that we're open to each other that way. We don't have to see each other in person and know each other to affect each other,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, and that connection, like the purpose behind that connection, if we all really recognize that and tapped into it, how much more amazing and expansive
Right?
could this, love just be, as well as, in just the creative process and creating the world we really want to live in. And you kind of beat me to it, but I was really curious, when you were on the first podcast, you spoke very affectionately about your relationship with James Avery. What was that like, being in this space, in this reunion, environment with your family and him not being there?
Yeah. Well, you saw the show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, that was hard. James was a large presence, and he was the patriarch. He was not just on the show, but in any situation.
Mm-hmm.
Dad's here, and he liked that role, and
Mm.
he filled it, and so him not being there was a huge void. I mean, it was, it's unmistakable, and that's happened. We've got together with each other, and it's hard, without not having James. It's hard not to feel him and think of him, and we all miss him all the
Yeah.
time. I think of him all the time.
Mm.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I was really curious, in particular, what that experience would be for you, and just seeing that played out on the show,
yeah,
and especially when Will was sharing about that one scene with his father was absent, and I think he was leaving or didn't show up or
he
something.
leaves, and yeah, he's supposed to
Yeah,
take him on a trip, and he leaves again. He's he tells him he's going to go with him, but then he gets up and he's going to go with him, but he's already left again.
and when James Avery whispers in his ear, now that's acting, and like it was
Yeah,
just
because
one of those.
he
Yeah.
went to James. I mean, he went to him and really, like he said, he wanted to be good for him. He really
Hmm.
wanted to impress James, but Will. The reason Will has come so far, he's fearless. He might want to do so well, but he will, instead of be prideful and not ask James for help because it's James he wants to please, he will go directly to James and say, "How do I do this?"
Wow.
You know,
Hmm.
I remember early on, he used to do that. He'd ask James for help. I remember when he got the movie 6 Degrees of Separation. He's a young man,
Hmm.
new actor, called up Denzel Washington, went straight to the, to ask for help with things, ask questions. He goes right in there head first, not worried about looking like a fool or falling on his face or nervous, but he gets through it and he does it. I really admire that in him. And he went to James on, quite a few occasions and said, how do I do this? And James was so generous. I remember once James saying something to him about crying, and I don't think it pertained to that scene, but he said to him once, think about it, when people cry, they're usually trying not to cry,
Yeah.
And it always stuck with me. And he would say little things like that. He'd listen a lot. And he'd say little things poking around, but he didn't always just, this is what you have to do. He'd say little things and like that. And I think those things, it all helped Will, like you said, and then the support. And as an actor, he's so there for you in a scene. James was like, he doesn't talk that much in that scene, but it's the two of them acting together in that scene is what does it to you. And that's what got Will where he went too, was he was doing the scene with James Avery, which allowed him to go where he needed to go.
Yeah. Did anything about the reunion surprise you at all about yourself or just in general?
Well, watching my first audition was weird. That was horrifying. I mean, it was great because it was like but it's, how you see those, they have these little things on the internet and they'll show like Reese Witherspoon with young Reese Witherspoon, or what I mean? Like Leonardo DiCaprio with his younger self, like hugging, like arm around each other.
Right.
It was like I was watching this little girl, it was weird. So I was like, who's that little girl? She's so cute. What is she doing? That was strange, but it was, that surprised me because it just, the time traveling thing, it made me really happy to look back at candid shots of all of us and remember, we didn't take it for granted, but we had 6 years of just going to work every day with people you just loved to talk to hang out with, and to act with, to do your thing with, to toss the ball and they catch the ball and they throw you one like this and you catch it over here, and and you're that's a good feeling when it clicks like that. And we had that, so we had a really good thing. It was just fun to watch the candid shots of like, God, she's lucky, meaning me, but watching me on the screen, like, God, she's lucky. Look at that. And so it was nice. It was just good. Learned about myself. I don't know. There were a lot of surprises. It was very emotional.
Yeah.
And, but it felt, as usual, great to see everybody and to fall right back in where we always just pick up where we left off.
Yeah. Any talks of a reboot at all?
No.
Not to ask.
No. Will's doing the dramatic version of The Fresh Prince. So I think a little bit of this was timely because it was our 30 year. But I think also him producing that, I think he needed to put to rest all of this, like, will there ever be a Fresh Prince reunion? Will there be a reboot? I think he needed to kind of give the fans and all of us something in that regard and then move on. I think this is a way, because it'd be harder to move on without it, probably.
Right.
It'll be easier to move on to the new show and whatever that will be. I mean, Peacock picked it up for 2 seasons and they haven't seen a single show.
Wow.
That's like unheard of.
Yeah.
So that was a good pitch, whatever it was. I saw the trailer, but I don't know what the pitch was for the whole show. For 2 seasons? Ozark didn't even come back to Netflix. Come on. It was a good show.
Yeah, the pitch must have been pretty amazing. And speaking of just transition and moving on, was there a difficult transition, creative, fun transition to then move on to Flying Free, your new book?
From my
From
other book.
yeah.
I had done the film of
Right.
a flying free version, animated film for Sweet Blackberry, and I was really happy with it. Lawrence Fishburne actually narrated it, and
Hmm.
he's incredible. So a lot of the writing I had already done for it for Sweet Blackberry, and I love writing the Sweet Blackberry stories. They're really fun. As
Yeah.
a fan of Shel Silverstein, and if you're a fan at all of Dr. Seuss, it's like the rhyming and the playfulness to tell the story is really, it's fun, and kids like it. It's engaging, but it's also fun to write. And so I had done that. And we had such beautiful imagery already, such beautiful illustrations from our Gregory Christie.
Hmm.
There were tweaks and things that had to be done to bring it to a book,
Hmm.
and it's a learning experience. There were things that were omitted that I regret I didn't catch on the first go round. And I realize I have to be more careful. I had somebody a critic commented about Bessie Coleman and her Native American heritage and how it was omitted how it wasn't there in the book. And I said, yes, it was. I wrote it because I really wanted to make sure that was in the book.
Hmm.
Well, I made sure it was in the film in the first version.
Ah, okay.
Went through the book and I thought, oh, it was one little stanza that I missed because you're doing a
Mm,
lot of things and you
right.
think you're covering everything. And so that's not there. So for anybody listening, just know Bessie Coleman was Cherokee as well. She was African American and she was Cherokee. It's not in our book, but it is in our film. But it's a learning experience.
Of
There's
course.
finessing imagery. When I wrote a lot of it, I wrote it for the images that we were putting it together with.
Hmm.
But then, of course, when you're writing a book, you don't have all of the images that are animated through the
Right.
story. So we just have certain ones. Excuse me.
It's okay.
So so it's selective. So you just have certain images that you're able. So so you have to tweak things along the way. Uh,
Yeah. And one thing I thought was really interesting too, if you can tell us a little bit more, in your author's note, you were saying the other Bessie, and when
yeah.
the book is incredible. We'll get into some of those nuances, but it's so funny because when I was telling friends I was interviewing you on, this book, they kept saying, "Oh, I know Bessie, the singer." I'm like, "No." And when I
That's
saw the
yes.
author's note, I was like, "Yes."
That's exactly your experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would, I had over the years doing Sweet Blackberry, I'm always assembling all these who I want to tell stories about, and it
Right.
changes all the time as I learn about more people. And Bessie Coleman, I thought, well, there are books out there about her. There are stories when I go to the libraries, I see in bookstores,
Yeah.
I see stories, and I'm like, well, maybe I don't need to tell her story because I want to tell little known stories. And it seems like people know about her. And then whenever I bring her up, people are like, oh yeah, Bessie Coleman, the singer. And I'm like, no, that's Bessie Smith. Different Bessie. Different Bessie. But it
Different
happens time
message.
and time again. Oh yeah, the
Yes.
singer, I know her. I'm like, no, 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 she wasn't a singer. So that's what brought me around to say, okay, I think I need to include Bessie's story in our Sweet Blackberry library here. We got to put this story of this amazing woman out there so they don't just think Bessie singer, they can think Bessie flyer,
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so funny you had the same experience.
So who is Bessie Coleman, just for people who are
Bessie
just tuning
Coleman is
in?
the
Yeah.
first Black female aviator. Bessie Coleman actually earned her pilot's license 3 years before, I think it was 3 years before Amelia Earhart earned her international pilot's license. Now, we don't, but we know about Amelia
No.
Earhart. We don't know anything about Bessie. But also, Bessie Coleman, as a Black female in the 1920s or 1920, nobody would teach her in the States how to
Right.
fly because she was Black and a woman. They wouldn't even teach her. So she got sponsorship. She was just amazing. You think about this young woman who ran around and talked to people and said, I want to do this. It wasn't as easy as hopping on a plane and going someplace,
Right.
obviously. So she had to get sponsorship to charter a boat. And she learned French and learned about the culture and went to France, where they would teach her as a
Mm-hmm.
Black female how to fly. And, of course, she knows nobody there. She doesn't know the culture. She doesn't know anything about the
Mm-hmm.
place, the language. But she learned as much as she could. She went and she spent months there training and studying and got her international pilot's license and came home a hero, you know. And then everybody knew her story. But she was an incredible inspiration to many men and women for years to come, including Josephine Baker,
Mm-hmm.
who actually got her pilot's license and was inspired by Bessie as well.
Yeah. And even both of those stories, which is so really interesting, you have to go away overseas in order to come back as this hero that you were rejected, from in the very first
Exactly.
place.
Right.
And go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
And and as soon as I read that part in the book, I knew a little bit of it, but just reading that in the story, I have been just talking to a lot of friends in my same, industry as a communicator in media and corporate affairs. And it's so interesting, Karyn, because I have some of the best luck in the global audiences, more so than I do in
Oh,
domestic USA home. And I was thinking about Josephine Baker. I was thinking about Bessie Coleman. I was thinking about, like, if these stories weren't even out there to begin with, to even have that level of determination of go where you need to go to get what you need to get to come back home, we would never know this.
right. Isn't that crazy?
It
That's an
is.
interesting cycle of things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that literally sort of grounds you in, like, the present reality of things,
Yeah.
just in general.
It's amazing. And then the people are so, we're looking at these people and they are they are heroic. They are
Hmm.
larger than life. And I often say about Bessie Coleman, that, if she were around today, people would be talking about her on Facebook and wherever. They'd be
Yeah.
going on about this incredible accomplishments of this woman, this young woman
Hmm.
who had the nerve, the guts, the chutzpah to like get up and go, hey, this is a really great thing that I think I want to do, I can do. Sponsor me, and gets all these people Black sponsorship,
Yeah.
going to Black banks and in newspapers and saying, help me. And these people are like, we'll do it. I'll sponsor you, and giving her money to go do your thing. We don't hear about that kind of stuff,
No.
you know
No.
that's that's no small thing. I have a picture of Bessie that I keep nearby because I see that smile
Mhm.
and I think of the time, and it's like there was nothing she couldn't do. She just like, this is what I want to do. She's just going for it, and I think without thinking of all of those potential roadblocks, and I hope that she can inspire everyone that way. I hope everyone that hears
Mhm.
her story can feel the same kind of inspiration I do when I look at her face.
Yeah. And the other inspiration that deeply just moved me was the illustrations in this book.
Beautiful.
First, how did you even go about selecting an illustrator, and why him?
Oh, Greg, he is just,
Oh,
he's a lovely person.
uh-huh.
I have to say, I'm so fortunate for the person that I'm working with to be such a lovely person. And the collaboration process is so exciting. I had looked at illustrators and children's books, and I started Sweet Blackberry having no idea what the heck I was doing. Literally, one foot in front of the
Part of
other in a
the-
pitch black room, like no idea where I am, how far in front of me anything is.
Right.
And I found Greg's illustrations, and I thought they were so charming, and
Mhm.
his use of color is just amazing. And I approached him. It's hard to remember now, but I remember early on in our relationship trying to figure out how to go from this having an award-winning illustrator to his work being animated. And he was really interested in that aspect of it, of seeing this work move. And if you look at Greg's body of work, he has done so much Black history in his work, so much. I mean, he doesn't mean to be a historian, but he really is now because he's just done so much and he researches. And one of the beautiful things about collaborating with him is not just these glorious, brilliant images that hit me on all levels, the color. I mean, every time I open up his stuff, it's the most exciting part about working on stuff with him is I write it, we figure out the storyboard with the animator, and then it goes to him to illustrate the scenes. And he comes back with things that are just so rich. But he does so much storytelling in his illustrations.
Yes.
You know, he shows you where you are, what it looks like in that part of the world, what the buildings look like, what the land looks like, how the people dress, everything. There's so many intricacies that he covers. I don't have to say anything. He automatically researches, gets it right, and brings this incredible life to it that he teaches. If you just looked at it and didn't even read, you would learn so much by just his images of the time and the place and who that person was by where they lived and when.
There is one in particular illustration. I mean, all of them. I mean, it was just breathtaking. But when Bessie Coleman is in the air and there's birds and she's engulfed in the clouds, like as soon as I read the text on the page and then I tried to read the text first, then look over at the photo, it was this thing of like this gas that you just take.
He can feel it. He can feel it. I mean, but he's an amazing artist. He really is. You know, he's very, there's something very much like a child about Greg. He's very solid and grounded, but there's this kind of, it's hard to explain because he's wise and he's not like, you know, flighty or anything, but he's almost like he's just in touch with a part with that, like that, that you said, that sense. He's in touch with it. So as he reads it, he feels it. And then he gets that down in his drawings. It's just amazing. He helps tell the story on so many levels.
And my mind is just blown by the pairing of both the text, the copy, as well as the illustrations. For you, anything that surprised you at all about this process, or you enjoyed doing the most?
Oh, I really love it when I get the proofs back, because we have another book coming out, which is that Greg and I did together. Our Gregory Christie, I have to say, it's called Greg. About Garrett Morgan, the inventor. Our film was called Garrett's Gift, but the book will be called Saving the World. How Garrett Morgan, something or other. I can't remember. It's a long title that we came up with finally. And again, with that, when you get the proofs and you see how they've selected with the images that we've selected, then the text laid on another page and the color for me, that's what I get really excited about, because Greg picks amazing color in his work, but the designers that have been putting the books together have a really beautiful appreciation for what he's done, and they're able to bring that same kind of beauty and energy to the pages where the text is.
Right.
So it's equally like fun to read it because you're getting this delicious page, you know. Yeah. And even though it's sumptuous and like I said, energetic. It's really it's a treat to see it all come together, and elements that I wouldn't be thinking about. Like I wouldn't think that the page the text is on, and I think of a white page text, things like that. No, they between the font and the edges and everything that goes into it, that it evokes so much joy. It's like, it's really a talent that everybody has putting it together. It's exciting to see come together. I love collaborating. Yeah,
I can tell that infectious level of creativity of just ideas coming together from folks in different areas. It really is very meaningful. One thing that I definitely want to say to you, Karyn, is like, I have one of your books just out displayed in the living room area. And it's really interesting when people come in and they're drawn to not just any book, but that book that's there. Are you seeing that a lot of adults are also just picking up these books and just running with them because of how well the art is, how well the writing is? Because
Well,
that's what's happening. Go ahead.
that's great. No, that's so exciting to hear.
Yeah.
The experience with the book is brand new with the picture book. With the films, that was something that got me right away because like I said, I'm walking in the dark, no idea what I'm doing or how, I had sense enough to get an advisor to talk to me about making sure the content, since it's for children, is on the right track and how I handle these subjects. But not knowing how people would be affected. And one thing I was aiming for was I wanted an audience of about 4 to 7-year-olds to be able to easily ingest and understand the stories.
Hmm.
I didn't expect that their older siblings and parents would be just as eager to sit down and listen to the stories.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the beauty of it and the content, not knowing the story of Janet Collins, the ballerina, or Bessie
Mm-hmm.
Coleman, or Garrett Morgan, that they would sit down through the whole story. I did story after story after story from people are that the older siblings and the parent, they all watch together. And I go visit when there's no pandemic. I visit schools across the country, and I've gone all the way up and through 8th graders, watching the films and having really great discussions with them. And I didn't set out to do that. I was thinking I was much younger, but everyone's really intrigued by the stories, and they love the illustrations as well.
Yeah, when I tell you it's a masterpiece, it definitely is a masterpiece, and it
Thank
crosses
you.
various generations in a way in which a lot of children's books and a lot of text, a lot of animated series just does not. In pandemic and COVID, have you seen any interesting stories at all, or any responses to either the books or the animated series?
We haven't. It's been strange because you're so isolated, and we don't get
Yeah.
to interact with people as
Hmm.
much. We did something this summer with the Fresh Air Fund
Hmm.
that was really good, and it was an older audience that we worked with, and we helped them develop their own Sweet Blackberry story.
Hmm.
And so it was really fun to work with older students because they're different. They, all the ages, they all have different comments and observations. And for them, it's much more about the technical and the actually getting in there and how do you do this? How do you make this? That it was interesting to work with them and hear what they had to say. But this lately, it's just been. I'd say it's what happened this summer. Aside from that experience, which was great, Sweet Blackberry experience, was trying to write my second book while the world was upside down.
Hmm.
Between the COVID itself and the uncertainty and all of the uprising,
Hmm.
and marching and pain, it's very difficult to write something that doesn't have to do directly with all of this, because
Right.
you're looking at what you're writing and going, who cares? Who cares? you know,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
I found that to be, it's been very challenging. I've had to put things aside and fiddle with other things. And,
Yeah. I was just telling my editor not too long ago, um, I'm actively involved in all the different social justice things that are happening because I'm a Black person, I'm a Black man, and seeing all these things. But what has really been difficult for me throughout like my creative process or just writing, whenever something happens, especially on a domestic or national or global level, or if I'm even hearing about it in like my neighborhood, my immediate response is to stop what I'm doing, the work that I've been purposed to do. How can I then help this immediate situation? And then you're like, oh, like, how do you find that balance
right.
between doing the work that you feel, really called and purpose to do, and then being able to be an agent for support and change in the community. Because if you're stopping every single solitary time, how does your own personhood get fed? How does the work get fed?
Right, right. Well, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Well, you're definitely doing the work though by doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
You know,
that's a good
yeah,
point. Yeah, that's true.
so it's going to bring itself to your work, and then
Hmm.
bring it out of other people, and it's going to do the most important thing, which is it's going to make us talk. It's
Right.
going to open discussion,
Yeah.
and that's what we need more than anything is to talk and listen.
And Karyn, this is what your book is doing. This is what your work is doing, and it's been such a pleasure to have you on here and just to share and to just I don't know. It was just a really great spirit of community. Like I miss being able to have these kind of conversations in person at the bookstore, at the coffee
I
shops,
know.
and this was just really great
This
time. And
was this was good. This filled a place in me, getting to talk to you.
I'm
Thank you.
glad. Now, just for our audience, where can we buy your book? Where can we also watch your Sweet Blackberry series?
I encourage everyone to check first with your local independent bookseller. Always, if you can. I know it's easier for us to just hit the Amazon click, but and if you do the Amazon, check out smile.amazon and try to support Sweet Blackberry or other charities. That is something that's there where a portion of your proceeds goes directly to the charity of your choice. And Sweet Blackberry is there on smile.amazon. You can go to the Amazon site and see more about it, how you can do that. And I would encourage you, because we are a nonprofit organization. We need all the
Yes.
help we can get. But yeah, I'd say go to your independent booksellers if you can. But, Barnes and Noble, Amazon have both How High the Moon and what I'm very excited about, Flying Free. How Bessie Coleman's Dreams Took Flight, which is our latest. And it's so beautiful, and
It is.
really proud of that book. You can find it there. You can also visit us, sweetblackberry.org. We have the DVDs for sale there. You can go to Canopy. It's really great for teachers, for educators to go to canopy.com and stream the stories if you need to with a Canopy subscription. And you can visit sweetblackberry.org. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook to see what we're up to. And you can visit me also, Karyn Parsons, on all of those things to see what I'm doing.
All right, folks, don't worry. I'll be able to have all of Karyn's contact information at the base of this podcast. Again, you can learn more about me by visiting clayswilliams.com. And I'm on all of your favorite social media by the handle of @Plan A with Clay. That's @Plan A with Clay. Remember, folks, Clay's with a K. Thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you in our very next episode of Plan A Conversations.